Here we go, the government final review. Here are the answers you've all been waiting for. The government final exam. Your semester final will be all multiple choice, 165 questions. Kind of long. It'll take you about 45 minutes to finish. Not to worry, we got 2 hours to take this test, and it'll be an online version on quizzes.com. Do your best or you will end up on the naughty list, which means the failure list. You do not want to have to take this class again. Semester final is 20% of your overall grade, so it can really help you. It can really hurt you. And now for the part you've all been waiting for, the answers to the review. Alright, a type of government where one person holds all the power is a dictatorship. These are bad guys: Saddam Hussein, Adolf Hitler, monarchies, autocracies, totalitarians, all those bad governments we've talked about. A type of government where the power is with the people is a democracy. Like the United States, the people vote, the government's supposed to listen to us, is how it's supposed to work, but a democracy. The definition is the power to make laws and frame public policy is government. This is the job of government. It can be any type of government that does this, but government is that definition. The people are the ultimate source of authority in which of the governmental systems, either a republic where we vote and the people represent us up in office, up in the government, or a democracy where people vote, the people still have the power in that form of government. The power to execute, enforce, and administer the laws is executive power. Executive. This is what the president does. He has the executive power. He's supposed to enforce and execute the laws. Judicial. These are the people that interpret the laws, determine their meetings, and settle disputes. Most of the time we think of it as the judges, especially the Supreme Court. Judicial. The body of fundamental laws for a country is its constitution. A lot of countries don't have written constitutions like we do. Obviously we wrote ours down so we'd have a copy of it. And it's just sort of how we set up our government, our constitution. Blank. This means supreme and absolute power within its own borders, sovereign or sovereignty. For whatever reason, this question ended up on the review like 10 times, so be ready for it. Sovereign. This type of government is one in which the powers of the government are divided between a central government and several local governments. Federal form of government or federalism. Layers of government. We got people up in Washington, we've got people in Austin, state level, national level, federalism. What are the three types of people or power that people exercise in government? Executive power, like our president, executes and enforces the laws. Judicial powers, like our court system, and legislative power, Congress makes the laws. Executive, judicial, legislative. All governments have these powers. This incident is where 5 colonists were killed and was called this in the press was the Boston Chainsaw Massacre. Boston Massacre. What are the 4 characteristics of a state? A state, to be qualified as a state, must have population, people, land, and sovereignty. What is an example of a public good? Something that helps out for the good of all the public. Clean air, clean water, government takes care of this, helps out everybody in the process. In a presidential system, the president is in charge of which branch? Our president is in charge of the executive branch. The power to carry out, enforce, and administer the law is known as the executive power. Executive power. This is what our president has. He is supposed to enforce and execute the laws for us. Supreme power of a state to act within its territory and have absolute authority. Once again, sovereign. Sovereign. Easy to remember, hard to spell. Sovereign or sovereignty. Which theory holds that the first government formed as a result of people agreeing among themselves to submit to the authority of a higher state power is the social contract theory. Basically, we're sitting around, we don't have a government, we all agree to have one, so we create some sort of informal social contract to agree to help each other out if bad things happen. Which power involves the authority to interpret laws and settle disputes is judicial power, or the judicial branch. Most of the time we think of the court systems and the Supreme Court when we talk about this. What is another name for the term general welfare? Remember in the preamble, talk about 6 things: common defense, perfect, nation, general welfare. Public goods is one of these things. Just help out everybody in general. What form of democracies are most of the democracies in the large industrialized nations? They are republics. We elect representatives and they make the decisions for us. We don't really vote on things in a direct democracy. We have a representative democracy or a republic. What principle of American democracy is at work when 2 opposing sides or groups relax and they reach an agreement is compromise. It all started with a great compromise, but we all got to give up a little bit so we can achieve the greater good. Compromise. All men are created equal reflects the founders' commitment to which principle? We find this quote in the Declaration of Independence, and once again, our favorite word, sovereignty. We put popular in front of it, and this just means the people have the ultimate and absolute power. The government is really supposed to serve the people, and since we're created equally, popular sovereignty. In the early days of the American Republic, people generally thought of liberty as freedom. Liberty and freedom. Integral to the ideal of self-government is the notion that the ultimate government authority, the place where government gets its power from, is, you guessed it, the people. The people is really where the power for government comes from. This is different than when we thought of kings when we would serve the king. No. Government serves us. What principle of American democracy is exemplified when people vote, obey the law, serve on juries, keep informed about current issues, or volunteer to help folks out is citizen or civic participation. One of the American ideals is we participate in government. At the very least, we vote on things, and we do help out in other ways. The U.S. federal system consists of a national government, and what other governmental levels is the state. Got people up in Washington, D.C. at the federal or national level. Got people down here in Austin at the state level. They both govern us simultaneously. What do you call information intended to persuade people or think or act in a certain way? Way back, first week of school, first week of the semester, propaganda, bandwagon, multiple identities, scare tactics, name calling, and celebrity testimonials. Characteristics of a Republican form of government is people vote, and whoever we vote for represents us. People vote, and the people we elect represent us, and they make the decisions for us. What is the idea that means the government is not all powerful is limited government? New concept. We came from a king where he could do whatever he wanted, had unlimited power. We create a new government and we put limits on them. They are supposed to have laws they follow. The weakness of the Articles of Confederation, among other things, was they did not have the power to tax. They could pass laws and they could ask for taxes, but they couldn't force the states to. So they had no power to actually get any money to do any of the things they wanted to do. Why did the colonists resent the taxes imposed by Parliament in the beginning of 1764? Is because they had no representation. When we talk about no taxation without representation, this was the tax that all started our catchphrase for the American Revolution. We don't mind paying the taxes, but we just want to say and be represented in Congress or Parliament at that time. Thomas Jefferson argued in the Declaration of Independence that if a government disregards the will of the people are free to remove the government by force if necessary. He made the argument, hey, if the government's not doing what they're supposed to, get rid of them. Unfortunately, we had to have a civil war to do so, but on the plus side, we won. America! We the people belongs to which of our governmental documents? We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, is the beginning of the Constitution and the preamble of that Constitution. For ideas on how to use the law to protect people's natural rights to life, liberty, and property, the framers looked to political philosopher John Locke. John Locke. Reason that James Madison is hailed as the father of the Constitution, he had the greatest influence on it. He was from Virginia Plan, Great Compromise. He's the guy that stood up, took charge, made things happen. For that reason, he is hailed as the father of the Constitution, not to be confused with George Washington, the father of our country. What is the idea that government should serve the will of the people? Representative government. Remember, we came from a king who did not serve us, we served him. And so we flip-flopped things when we came up with our Constitution, representative government. A two-house legislature is known as a bicameral legislature. A one-house legislature is known as a unicameral. Bicycle 2, unicycle 1. All the harsh and repressive acts as a whole are known as the intolerable acts. We kind of just group them all together. So bad, so terrible, they're just intolerable. A little bit of propaganda in there, but intolerable acts. The philosopher that were discussed in the Declaration of Independence, repeat question, John Locke again. John Locke. This is the rebellion that consisted of the attacking of courthouses to impose on the foreclosing on farms, was known as Shays' Rebellion. Daniel Shays would attack the courthouses, and the courthouses couldn't foreclose on the farmers who had fought in the American Revolution. Shays' Rebellion. The formal approval of a government document is ratification. Ratification. The home of George Washington was Mount Vernon. National Treasure Part 2, where they kidnapped the president, that big White House where they're having the party at, that's Mount Vernon. You can go and visit it to this day. One of those things on your bucket list you need to go do. It's a really, really neat place to go. Mount Vernon, back when they named people's homes. The delegates gathered in Philadelphia in May of 1787 in order to amend the Articles of Confederation. They were not there to create a constitution, they were just going to fix the Articles of Confederation. Turned out they were so incredibly inept, unable to collect taxes, among other things, and so they just kind of threw them away and started over and went with the Constitution. Luckily, they made this decision for us. Amend the Articles of Confederation. The group of delegates who showed up at this Philadelphia convention and ended up writing the Constitution were the framers. These were the guys that kind of set up the framework for our government. Why did the large states favor the Virginia plan? Because it means more power for the big states. The big argument about the Constitution was who would be in charge and who would control all the power. In this plan, the big states were based off population, and so they'd have more power. Of course, the small states didn't like that, so they decided to go with the New Jersey plan, a bit of it, and the Great Compromise was acceptable to the smaller states because in the Senate, everybody gets 2 representatives, 2 senators. Big states, like Texas get 2, small states like Montana get 2. Now, they weren't around back then, but that's kind of how they settled it. In the House of Representatives, bigger states got more people. In the Senate, everybody's equal. According to the 3/5 Compromise, 3/5 of a state's slave population would be counted in the population. So, we still don't count them as a whole person. 3/5 of the population did. You also would have to pay taxes on those slaves, but they were counted in the population in terms of representation for the House of Representatives. What is the ideal, or what ideal did the Anti-Federalists find that the Constitution lacked? These were the people that were against the Constitution because it did not have a Bill of Rights that ensured people's individual rights. This is the Bill of Rights where it comes from. The Anti-Federalists wouldn't ratify it unless they went back and added the Bill of Rights to their, Constitution. What is the name of the compromise where Congress had agreed to have 2 houses in the legislature? Officially, it was known as Connecticut Compromise. Dude from Connecticut came up with it, and so it was named the Connecticut Compromise. However, most of the time we think of it as the Great Compromise, because this is the one that set it all off, and we are able to go forward from here and eventually got the Constitution out of the Connecticut Compromise. The name of the compromise where all 3 people would be counted and all other would be tallied by a percentage, all free people. 3/5 Compromise. Here's where we're counting 3/5 of the slaves. Free people got counted, all other people tallied by a percentage, a 3/5 percentage. What is one reason the Constitution has endured so long? Because it changes with time. We have the ability to add amendments to it. When something comes up, we can change it, we can add stuff to it, and it's endured over time because the way we interpret it changes with time as well. The duties of governing are divided among 3 branches under the principle of separation of powers. Here's one of those government buzzwords that we have, separation of powers. We got executive power, President handles that. Legislative power, Congress takes care of that. Judicial power, the Supreme Court and the court system take care of that for us. The system where where each branch of government can limit the powers of others. We check the power and balance it out between the 3 branches. Veto, override vetoes, declare things unconstitutional, declare war, commander-in-chief, judges are there for life. All these things, checks and balances. Not one branch of the government can do too many crazy things without the other branches slowing them down a little bit. What do you call the power of the president to reject any act of Congress? This would be veto power. If Congress passes a bad law, president gets to veto it. The power the courts have to determine whether government is in agreement with the Constitution is judicial review. If we pass a bad law and it violates the Constitution, the Supreme Court can help us understand that and review that law with their judicial power, thus judicial review. Ben Franklin was the author of the Albany Plan. The Albany Plan. We, the people, relates to which of the following principles of the Constitution? When we're talking about people, we're always talking about popular sovereignty. The people have the power. The people have the sovereignty. They're the ones that are supposed to hold the power and control the power. The court case that set the stage for courts to have the power of judicial review was Marbury v. Madison. Marbury versus Madison. This is one of those cases you hear throughout history classes. Midnight judges and all that kind of stuff. Marbury versus Madison gave themselves the power of judicial review. This is the group that actually makes the formal selection of the president is the Electoral College. We vote and sort of set up the Electoral College, but they're the ones that actually elect the president. The first set of laws that the United States were governed under was the Articles of Confederation. Fought the American Revolution, we won. Then we become America, we become the United States. First government we tried out, Articles of Confederation. Didn't work out too well, so we moved on from that. The blank was ruled unconstitutional. This is the line item veto. We tried to give the president the power to mark out the bad parts of a bill and only keep the good stuff. But then it sort of, overpowered that whole checks and balances veto thing. So the Supreme Court said, no, line item veto is unconstitutional. Even though we were trying to help out and do something good, presidents don't have the power to just mark out. All or nothing. Two major parties working together to find common ground is called a bipartisan effort. Partisan parties, that's sort of where you stick together if you're a Republican, stick together if you're a Democrat. When they come together, two sides working together, bipartisan effort. The original number of amendments in the Bill of Rights was 17. They came up with 17. They took those 17, boiled them down, got them down to 12. They sent those. 12 of them were approved by Congress. They took those 12, sent them to the states. The states ratified or approved 10 of them. And so the original number goes from 17 to 12 to 10. And what was ratified or passed by the states is the first 10 amendments, as we know them. Formal qualifications to become president: you got to be 35 years old, you got to be a natural born citizen, and you must have lived in the United States for at least 14 years. So you can be born here and move away, but you got to at least come back for 14 years and be old enough before you become president. And if you do become president, you will earn a salary of $400,000. Now, with all the other stuff, it's probably about $15 or $20 million. Free Air Force One, free limousine, free White House to live in, personal chef, all kind of other stuff. But $400,000 in the bank that you get. The formal statement of basic principles that a party believes in, stands on, campaigns with is its platform. So what the Republicans believe is their platform, what the Democrats believe is their platform, and any other of the minor parties also. The laws made by the will of the people come through which body of U.S. government? Who's in charge of making laws? Congress. The House of Representatives and the Senate is collectively known as Congress. The elected leader and most powerful member in Congress is the Speaker of the House. And he's on here about 3 or 4 times in different questions, so make sure you know who this guy is. Speaker of the House. It was a lady for a bit, but then it's a guy again. So, Speaker of the House. Who is the President of the Senate? Officially and by the Constitution, it is the Vice President of the United States. He gets to be in charge of the Senate. He doesn't get to talk, he doesn't get to vote unless there's a tie, so he basically sits around and does nothing. But he is the President of the Senate. There are 2 senators from each state. 50 states times 2 means there'll be 100 senators. Which court order forces the police to present a person in court to face charges unless we're being invaded or there's rebellion going on? Latin word, writ of habeas corpus. This means the police, the government cannot throw you in jail and just leave you there. They must bring you before a judge so that we can start the whole due process and figure out if the government's doing what they're supposed to. Writ of habeas corpus. If you ever get arrested, you'll want one of these things so you can get before a judge and hopefully get out of there. Don't get arrested. Laws that punish you after the fact, they are illegal according to the Constitution, are ex post facto laws. This is one of the things the Constitution says we can't pass, is ex post facto laws. They would punish you after the fact. So if you do something that's not illegal today, but in a week we pass a law and that act becomes illegal, we can't go back and punish you before or after the fact. So if you do something before it's illegal, then you just get away with it, and we can't punish you afterwards. And if we want to punish a group of people or punish you without having a trial, we can issue a bill of attainder. This just means we'll round up a bunch of people and throw them in jail, and we don't have to, give them courts or due process or anything. And this too is illegal by the Constitution. So when we rounded up all the Japanese folks and put them in internment camps in World War II, that's sort of a bill of attainder, totally illegal, and we feel bad about it now, but at the time we did it, and it totally violated the Constitution. One of those dark periods in our history. Most powerful member, once again, Speaker of the House. This guy, it was a lady for a little while, but then it's a guy again now. So, Speaker of the House. This guy serves as an assistant to the Speaker of the House, and that would be the Majority Leader. The majority party gets to elect the Speaker of the House. Then the second guy in charge is the Majority Leader. This term applies to the 20 permanent committees where bills start out in are these standing committees. They're always in standing. They're always standing. They're always there. About 20 of them. What job does the Constitution assign the Vice President? Once again, President of the Senate. Constitution says he's the head guy, even though he is not given any power to do much of anything, really. In the absence of the Vice President, who gets to run the Senate? Because if the Vice President doesn't get to do anything, he's not going to hang out there all day just doing nothing. It's a guy called the President Pro Tem. They basically get the oldest guy that's been there the longest of the majority party, and it's just sort of an honorary position. Here, you get the gavel, bang your hammer up at the front, and you get to be in charge, and we'll kind of tell you what to do. President Pro Tem. The first person to sign the Declaration of Independence was big ego guy John Hancock. The year the Bill of Rights was added to the Constitution, 1791. Anti-Federalists agreed to go ahead and pass it in 1789. It took them about 2 years to get the Bill of Rights together and added 1791. The blank are the assistants, the whips are the assistants to the floor leaders and link the party to the floor leaders. They sort of whip up support, they whip up the votes, they whip up, energy, excitement. A bill with an extra something that is unrelated to the bill itself is called a rider. So if you know a bill is going to be passed, you want to attach one of these little riders to it so that your stuff gets passed as well. It's kind of a sneaky, underhanded way to do things, but helps you get reelected. This is the minimum number needed to conduct business. If you remember, in Mr. Smith goes to Washington, called a quorum. When he started his filibuster, little page boys went out and made everybody come back. In order to do official business, you must have a quorum. What do you call an attempt to talk a bill to death? Talk and talk and talk, just like Mr. Smith did when he went to Washington. A filibuster. A filibuster. You basically just waste time and waste time until the other side gives up and kind of calls mercy. When the president signs a bill, it then becomes law. Once it gets the president's signature, it becomes law. What can Congress try to do if its members disagree? They can override that veto with a 2/3 vote. It's real hard to get that high of a vote, but if it's something important or controversial, Congress can override a presidential veto with a 2/3 veto override vote. The first and temporary capital of the U.S. was New York. They wrote the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia. They wrote the Constitution in Philadelphia. Then when it came time to set up the first government, put it in New York. And then eventually it gets to Washington, D.C. Who was the King of England at the time of Revolution? KG3, as he was known on the streets, otherwise known as King George III, or the Third. This act set the permanent number in the House to 435. Was the Reapportionment Act of 1929. The Reapportionment Act of 1929. The Senate's power to approve international treaties negotiated by the President is one of those examples of checks and balances. The President is the only one that can negotiate a treaty, but he has to bring that treaty and give it to the Senate, and the Senate must approve that treaty. So the President can't get in a bad treaty because he's got to have the Senate approval, so he's got to make sure that it's something that the American people would like and want. The number of amendments in the Constitution is 27. Some people say 26 because we got the whole prohibition and then we repealed prohibition, but there's 27 in there, so. In the preamble, what does the phrase "form a more perfect union" mean? They were talking about having the states get along better. At the time we had 13 little states that did 13 little different things, so we wanted to have a more perfect union and have those states get along a little bit better. The advisory board to the president is called its cabinet. The Constitution is divided in articles, 7 articles. Article 1 is about Congress, 2 is about the President, 3 is about the judicial branch. What is the purpose of the preamble of the Constitution? Was to explain why we wrote the Constitution, explain this new government we created, general welfare, perfect union, common defense, all those good things. When a president seeks to improve relations with other countries, he or she is acting in the role of a foreign or chief diplomat. Foreign diplomat or chief diplomat or chief foreign diplomat. Different books call it different things. In the Electoral College that chooses the president, each state gets 1 vote for every congressman they have. You add up the number of House members you have plus the number of senators, which is always 2, and that is how many electoral votes you get for each candidate. A power the executive branch has to check the legislative branch's veto. Seems like we've heard that one a time or two before. The president is elected by the Electoral College. Seems like another repeat question. I really need to work on this thing. What was the original purpose of the Electoral College? Was so that smart folks, I think the test answer is enlightened folks, get to choose the president. Common, ordinary folks like us elect the Electoral College. Those smart people choose a great president that will lead us and do great things. 1789, when we came up with the idea, it sort of made a little more sense. Today, we could probably do without. The title of the cabinet members is the Secretary, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Secretary of Homeland Security, Secretary of Agriculture, or Secretary of Energy. Early vice presidents complained about too little to do. They didn't get to talk, they didn't get to vote unless a tie was happening. They just kind of sat around and watched everything else. The case that said flag burning was a constitutionally protected form of speech. Right here in Texas, some fool burned an American flag, so we threw him in jail like good Texans do. And the Supreme Court said, even though we do not like that and we think it's a bad thing, it is protected speech. Got to protect the good speech and the bad speech. Vernonia versus Acton. This was the drug testing case. Sort of an illegal search and seizure case, Fourth Amendment. This is the case that said, you know what, it's okay if schools drug test student athletes. At the time it was just football players, but it's expanded to just about everybody as long as you drive on campus or participate. Supreme Court said school can do it if we so choose. New London versus Kelo. This is where the government can take your property as long as they give you just compensation. This is the take your property case. If they want to build a road where your house is, they can take your house from you. They do have to pay you for it, but you can't refuse it. They do get to take your house. Gideon versus Wainwright. This is the lawyer case. You must have a lawyer even if you cannot provide one. This guy got arrested, thrown in jail for burglary. While he was in jail, he became a lawyer and went to the Supreme Court. And so now you have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be provided for you. Gideon versus Wainwright, the lawyer case. The number of houses in the number of seats in the Senate, 2 senators per each state times 50 states equal 100. The number of seats in the House of Representatives is 435. This is the case that allowed black civil rights students to peacefully protest on the state capitol. They were in the state of South Carolina at the time. South Carolina versus Edwards. If you are peacefully protesting, the cops cannot kick you out. You gotta make sure you're doing it peacefully though. Name of the congressional election that is held between presidential elections is the midterm elections. Midterm elections. House elections every 2 years. Presidential elections every 4 years. So midway between those four-year election terms for presidents, we have the midterms. Throw in a few Senate elections as well. The election where voting districts are set for a candidate running for a specific seat, single member, divided up into districts, vote for a single member. Head person is the Speaker of the House. What is that, the 10th time we've had that question on here? The benefit of Congress members for free postal services. Congressmen can mail out free letters thanks to the franking privilege. You get to send out stuff for free. It's a real good way to get reelected and don't have to pay for any of the stamps. Franking privilege. Age requirement of the Senate. You must be 30 years old to be a senator. Voting districts where candidates are elected as a whole group at large. Everybody gets to vote for all the candidates. We don't divide the state up. We don't divide it up into districts or anything like that. Everybody in the state gets to vote for all the candidates. Everyone in the county gets to vote for all the candidates. Everyone in the city gets to vote for all the candidates. How long do you have to be a citizen to be a member in the House of Representatives? 7 years you must have lived here to be in the House. How old to be in the House? 25 years old for the House. 30 for the Senate, 35 for the President. The President's party usually loses seats during the midterm elections. We elect a new president, we get really excited, he doesn't really live up to it, we vote for the other party. Happened to Obama, happened to Bush, it's going to happen to Trump. It's just sort of the way we go. We love us some Republicans, then we love us some Democrats, then we love us some Republicans, love us some Democrats. Number of states that are so small in population that they only have one member. 7 states are such small states. 7. Process where voting districts are drawn unfairly. That weird word gerrymandering. Remember, we draw the voting districts. If we can cheat, we're going to try it. Drawing those lines unfairly is called gerrymandering. Gerrymandering. Legislation starts with 3 groups: citizens, president, and pressure groups. Pressure groups are groups of people that put pressure on Congress to do things. The NRA for guns, AARP for old people, now National Organization of Women for women folks. So any of these groups that sort of join forces in order to put pressure on the government to pass laws. All bills first start out in committee. They start out in committee in the small little groups, and then they go out to the open floor for debate. But committee. After both houses pass a bill, it then goes to the president. Passes the House, passes the Senate. Maybe it goes through the conference committee, but eventually it ends up and the president gets it after both other groups. Talking a bill to death in order to stop legislation is the filibuster. Mr. Smith talking, the filibuster. How many justices does the Supreme Court have? 9. You want to have an odd number so that there's always a majority. 5 to 4 decisions. You'll always have an odd number and a majority. How many total electoral votes are there? 538. 100 senators plus 435 House members is 535, and then the District of Columbia gets 3 electoral votes, and that's how you get the 538. In order to win, you have to have 270. That's the least amount and still have a majority. 270 electoral votes, you get to be president. How is these number determined? Is the number of congressmen that you have, your senators plus your House members, your total number of congressmen. So 2 senators plus 36 House members. For Texas, we have 38 electoral votes. Who is the candidate who is running for office that is already holding that office? Is the incumbent candidate. The incumbent candidate. So when Donald Trump runs for president again, he will be the incumbent president and the incumbent candidate. Which of the following factors led to the passage of the 22nd Amendment? Was FDR. Remember Franklin Roosevelt, World War I, Great Depression, all that going on. And we just kept electing the same guy. After that, Congress passed and the states passed the 22nd Amendment. So you only get to serve terms. Under the Constitution, who holds the actual power to elect the president is the Electoral College. The Electoral College. The framers thought that making federal judgeships permanent would help ensure judicial independence. If you're a judge and you know you have a lifetime appointment and cannot be fired, you're much more likely to, be fair no matter what, even if the president's pressuring you or something like that. If you do something illegal, they can still impeach you and kick you out. But as long as you play by the rules, you cannot get fired. Which group gathers to hear evidence of a possible crime is the grand jury. The prosecutor presents the evidence to the grand jury and they decide whether or not to go forward with an actual trial. Which of the following would be handled in a civil trial? So 7th Amendment, civil trial, if it's worth $20, you get to sue somebody in a civil trial, like if there's a property dispute, where to build a fence on your property, where your line starts and someone else's. So if it's between two people and it's not criminal, then it would be a civil trial. The right to not have to testify against yourself, I plead the 5th Amendment. No cruel or unusual punishment is the 8th Amendment. Anything not listed or in the Constitution falls to the states is the 10th Amendment. Freedom of speech, press, assembly, petition is, hopefully you know that's the First Amendment. No illegal searches is the 4th Amendment. No excessive bail or knee excessive bail is the 8th Amendment. No double jeopardy is the 5th Amendment. They can't try you twice for the same crime if you were found not guilty. Just because the rights aren't listed does not mean they are denied is the 9th Amendment. Just because it's not in there doesn't mean you don't get it. You get a civil trial as long as it's worth $20 is the 7th Amendment. No double jeopardy is the 5th Amendment. You have the right to confront witnesses against you is the 6th Amendment. So no government secret witness. The right to bear arms is the 2nd Amendment. The right to peaceably assemble is the 1st Amendment. No illegal seizures is the 4th Amendment. You must receive just compensation if the government takes your property is the 5th Amendment. No quartering of soldiers is the 3rd Amendment. You have the right to counsel an attorney, a lawyer, is the 6th Amendment. And that is the end. Good luck to you. I hope this helped out. And I'll see you come test time.